All right, there we go. How you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you? I've listened to your podcast about a million times. I finally get to actually see your lips move when you're talking.
Well, don't hold too high of expectations. My wife will tell you it gets old quickly, but no, it's good to connect and welcome to happy hour as we call it. What did you bring yourself?
I have a nice fine pilsner here, so
Okay, I have a
it's a
Mike
choice.
Hess. Looks like a local San Diego brewery. So
Nice.
cheers to you.
Cheers. Cheers.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm glad this worked out. And gosh, you said on the phone the other day you had quite the day. What'd you do? Fly the F-86 one day and then
I
T2
did,
next?
yeah. I flew the F-86 one day, and then the next day I flew the T-6, and then the next day I flew the T-2. And today I spent about an hour hangar flying our Corsair, which is not yet flying, but it
Ah,
should be flying in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're getting ready to get it out and start. We've done engine runs and taxi tests and all that, and still doing a little bit of fine tuning. Then we'll take that to the air probably in the next 3 weeks, I think. It's been a
awesome.
7-year restoration project.
Wow. Wow, that is quite an effort. And so it's what, Warbird Heritage Foundation?
That's correct. Yeah, Warbird
Okay.
Air Foundation. Yeah.
Now, how did you start that?
Well, I've been interested in aviation since I was about 6 years old. My grandfather actually was a aeronautical engineer for Lockheed, and out in California, we'd go out and visit him, and I always liked what your grandfather did. I thought
Oh
it was
yeah.
really cool. And so he kind of sparked that interest. And so ever since I was about 6 years old, I was reading every magazine you could think of and books, building models and all that kind of stuff. And in high school, I was a grease monkey at the local airport and started to get flying lessons and all that. Was going to try and go to the Air Force Academy. Didn't think about the Naval Academy at the time, but I had really bad eyes. I mean, I had Coke bottles for glasses, and
Okay.
that was the time in the kind of right at the end. Vietnam was winding down, so it was sort of the 72, 3, 4 sort of time frame.
Right.
So, and so they weren't, taking anybody for pilot slots,
Right.
even with LASIK or any of that other stuff. So I went to college and all that. So, but then about 30 years ago or so, I got my pilot's license, and I've been flying very aggressively since then. And I always was interested in the military aviation and military style of flying. And I think about in the 90s, I bought a T-28,
Hmm.
so an old Navy trainer. Learned how to fly that, and I thought that was really fun and really cool. And then I was in an airport one day, and I saw a guy with a Stearman, an open cockpit biplane, and I'm like,
Okay.
wow, now that was really cool. So I bought that one, and then I can't remember what happened after that. I think I might have started thinking about jets and got an L-39. And anyway, it just sort of built, and then I accumulated a few of the airplanes, and I thought, you know what, this might turn into something a little bit more than just flying airplanes. And so I created a museum basically called the Warbird Heritage Foundation. We started that in 2003, and the purpose of it is to acquire, restore, and operate historic military aircraft.
Okay.
So the whole idea behind it is that you can go to a museum and stand behind a rope, and you can look at a Corsair, and you can say, "Oh, isn't that cool? It's got an inverted gull wing. Isn't that neat?"
Hmm.
But you can't experience the airplane by seeing it fly, by hearing the sounds,
You're right.
seeing the smoke, smelling it, all that. So our whole deal is we want to operate these airplanes. So they're not static display. We have 16 airplanes now, or 15, and they all operate. And so the whole theory behind it is they have to be historically significant. So we wouldn't necessarily have airplanes in that didn't have a particularly significant
Right.
part in conflicts around the world or whatever. They have to be original, and they have to be fully operational, and they have to be rare. So some of the airplanes we have are pretty rare, like the T2 Buckeye. There's only two of them flying in civilian hands right now.
Wow.
And the
But
F-86, there's maybe
yeah.
less than a dozen.
Hold on, Paul, though. I
Yeah.
have to stop you. And if this is asking you to kiss and tell, I apologize. But if I was into old muscle cars, I can go down and get an old Mustang or Camaro. I mean, these days they're not that cheap, but they're not that expensive. You're
Yeah.
talking about picking up airplanes and just left and right. I mean, airplanes aren't cheap.
No, they're not. They're not. I have a very understanding wife.
I
Uh,
say.
yeah.
All
No,
right.
I got lucky. After college, I went to graduate school, business school, and I had a pretty successful business career. So I was
Okay.
able to retire early. So I retired at 53, and so I've been kind of doing this as
All
sort of a
right.
hobby.
Well,
So,
like I said, I'm not asking to know the inner workings of too much here, I hope, but just quote unquote picking up an L-39 has never, I don't think, crossed my lips.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay.
I always wanted to be a military aviator, and was never able to do it, and so I'm getting my revenge now.
Ah, well, you probably made more money than I did. All right, so you created the foundation here, and so for those who are able to watch this, we're recording on Zoom. I'm going to share the screen because you have really amazing hangar, if you will, full of airplanes here. And I don't know, you said some of these are belong to other folks, and they're all part of the organization. Is that right?
No, no, they're all part of the museum.
All part of the, okay, and you run
Yeah,
that?
everyone. Yep.
All right. So we have an F-86 F Sabre here, and we can drop anchor on some of these if you want. But I see
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
P-51 Mustang, a Skyhawk, a Texan, a Sky Raider, like you said, the L-39. I mean, the T-2, the Stearman. These are some really amazing airplanes. I guess the one I want to ask you about right away is the P-51 because that was always one of my childhood favorites. Is it as cool as I think it is?
Yeah. Yes, it is. In a word, the answer is yes.
Oh
Um,
man.
so, the P-51 is it's got beautiful lines.
Mm,
And it's so historically significant in World War II. It really changed the whole complexion of World War II because it was the only airplane that the Allies had that could actually escort the B-17s all the way to Germany,
right.
fight off the Luftwaffe, and escort them all the way back. And before that, we couldn't, our tactical bombing, or I don't know if it's tactical or strategic bombing, it just didn't work because we were taking such heavy losses
Oh
because we could
gosh.
only escort the bombers part way there, and the Luftwaffe knew it, and they would just wait until the fighters peeled off, and then the bombers were easy prey. So
Right.
it really changed it. So they made about 15,000 of them, and there's some really interesting history about how the airplane was designed and all of that, which we could go into at
Yeah.
some point if you want. Um, but there's only about 150 left flying right now. And I would say of any of the airplanes that are Warbirds, the Merlin engine, so the engine that the Mustang has is a Rolls-Royce engine,
Right.
V12, liquid-cooled V12 engine, um, called the Merlin engine, and it was built in the United States under license by the Packard Motor Company.
Oh,
So
okay.
most Mustangs have Packard-built Merlin engines.
I got you.
And but they have probably the sweetest sound
Mm,
of any airplane. When a Mustang does a low pass at 320 or 350 knots or something like that down the runway, it is the sweetest sound in the world. I mean, no doubt about it.
well, unless you're the World War II Luftwaffe, but yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
that. I've been to the Reno air races a couple times.
Mhm.
I'm guessing you've been there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
many times.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, that sound is just fantastic. Did I read correctly? I don't know if you know anything about this, but maybe it was the P-38. But I read that, of course, when the war ended, the production at home was still going on. And some of these, they were built and flown somewhere and destroyed right away. And that just
Yeah.
breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of them were. So a lot of these airplanes, they have very interesting histories. You can't do it now, but back then you could buy a P-51 Mustang surplus for about $1,500. Isn't that amazing? I mean, you could literally $1,500, and you could buy it for almost the value of the fuel that was in the gas tank.
Oh my goodness.
And now they're incredibly
Oh,
expensive.
yeah. Add a few zeros to the back. Well, Paul, when you and I create a time machine, let's do that first. Let's go back to 1946
Yeah,
or whatever and
yeah.
buy a whole fleet of those and
I
store them
would
in
buy a bunch of the Corsairs.
climate
I'd buy
controlled.
P-38s because P-38s are really expensive now.
Yeah, I
They're
wanted to
very
ask you.
rare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
are you on the lookout for one of those or
Yeah, maybe. I think our next one. So we have, if you look at the collection, um, we have World War One in the form of the Newport 28.
okay.
Now that's technically a replica, but it is a highly original replica. And
Okay.
that's the only exception, sort of, to our rule, because we just couldn't get an actual physical uh, World War One airplane. It was just too complicated, too hard to find them. They're way too valuable. They're too rare. They're very unreliable mechanically, so
All right.
they're really not that safe to fly. But so we have World War One, we have World War Two, both European theater and Pacific theater. So we've got
Yeah.
the Corsair Pacific, the Mustang in Europe. The P-38 was in both of those theaters, right? They flew in Europe and they flew in the Pacific, but we don't have anything in the China-Burma theater.
Oh.
So our next acquisition target would be a P-40.
Uh-huh.
So that would be Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers P-40. So that way we would have World War II, and we would have the Pacific theater covered, the European theater, and the China-Burma theater covered.
I see. So you take an approach of historical, cover the world kind of thing, not just the airplane, but remnants, if you will, from each
Yeah,
theater.
because we want to be able to tell when people come into the museum to visit, or we take the airplanes to air shows, we want to be able to tell the story of
Mm,
not only the airplane, but how it was used, maybe some stories about the people and the pilots who flew them, things like that, to sort of bring it to life,
yeah.
opposed to just seeing a static display. So,
Well, and that's what you said earlier. There's nothing like hearing, feeling, smelling, all that. Of course, all that comes at a cost. And I'm not talking money here necessarily, but effort wise, you've
yeah,
got I saw on your website, a staff of folks. So there are AMPs that keep all these things flying, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely. So,
so it's quite an
because
effort, I'm sure.
they're all operational, they all have to be, they have to go through annual inspection.
Hmm.
So we have a flying season and a maintenance season, basically.
All right.
So our flying season starts about May 1st and ends at the end of October. And then our maintenance season starts November 1st and ends the end of April, right?
Right.
And we have a couple of different hangars, and so we have restoration projects going on, but we also have the maintenance things going on. So in the summertime, we're you've heard of the term FBO, right? A fixed
Sure.
base operator, FBO. Well,
Yeah.
we're not an FBO, we're an FBF. We fly them, we break them, we fix them. So in the summertime, we fly them, and all we do is the mechanics spend time fixing squawks.
Hmm.
So for instance, I flew the T2 the other day, and the canopy seal didn't close properly. So
Uh,
we were speed limited, had to come back and land and fix that. So these things are old airplanes. It's not like getting a brand new car off the lot. These
right.
things built in the 40s and the 50s or whatever, and things tend to break.
Oh yeah.
Knock on wood, so far nothing's broken that is serious, but we're constantly fixing little squawks or chasing leaks,
Yeah.
hydraulic leaks or oil leaks or fuel leaks or all
But
that sort of stuff.
Paul, let me ask you something because you have a long experience in aircraft and with the older aircraft. I wonder if this is true. I've always thought that aircraft tend to break more when you don't use them than when you do. Do you have any evidence to
Totally
suggest
true.
that might? Yeah. Do you
Totally
agree?
true. Particularly, um, the Mustang's a perfect example of that. I find that if I fly it regularly,
Hmm.
and by regularly I'm thinking, like let's say once every 2 weeks or something like that. So it's not every day, but if I fly it regularly, it starts easier. It seems to warm up a little bit quicker, um, and it seems to be happier. If I let the airplane sit for 2 months and it doesn't fly, like the seals start getting brittle, it
Hmm.
starts to leak a little bit, you get a little coolant leak here, it doesn't start as easily. So there's a lot to that. And they're complicated mechanical pieces of equipment, and they
Yeah.
need to be exercised and lubricated and get the oil running through the system, you
Right.
know. But you're
Right.
absolutely right. That's totally true.
Well, and it's a bit of a tangent, but I think fairly appropriate at this time when I think about the airlines, my airline particularly, having parked all these airplanes in the desert right now during the COVID recovery. And I think, okay, I hope someone's looking after those airplanes because it's easy to park them. They were flying great, but once you set them for a month or two, it's a whole different story. Like you said, things
Yeah.
suddenly start leaking or seals decide they were fine when they were regularly lubricated, but now they're going to get brittle and break and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Well,
So
getting those back to life, I think I'm assuming they're going to have to do some sort of mechanical review of them before they're not going to just turn the key and go. I wouldn't think. But
no, and I imagine where they have them parked, they've got a crew of folks that
yeah,
take care of them. And then of course they're usually, well, with some exceptions, they're parked at busy airports, but for the most part, like in Victorville here in California,
yeah,
they'll have to send a crew out and fly it to LA or somewhere anyway. So they'll have a chance to kind of run it through its
and it's
paces a little
dry
bit.
out there, which is
Yeah.
good. And all
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. And I think that's why they pick it.
yeah.
All right. So what do you guys do? I mean, you don't just fly for jollies. Do you do tours? Do you go to air shows, go to air races? What do you do?
We do a lot of air shows. I'm doing fewer air shows now than I used to, but I used to do
Is
uh,
anybody doing air shows right now?
well, none right now. None right
Okay.
now. But we used to do. I used to be very active on the air show circuit. I used to do a TAC demo in the A4, and I did a TAC demo in the F-86. I was part of the first civilian jet demo team,
Oh,
and we flew L-39s. That was back in the 90s.
cool.
So we did that. I fly for the Navy Legacy Flight Program now. So I fly the A4, the T2, and soon the Corsair, in the Legacy Flight Program. So we
Which
do that.
means you're in formation with a Hornet, for example?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
we do, the Hornet may do a TAC demo, and then I'll take off in the A4, and they'll have another guy take off in a Corsair, and we'll do a particular formation
Right.
display at the air show where you can see World War II, Vietnam, and modern fighters all in formation together.
Right.
Air Force has the same
Oh, yeah.
called the Heritage Flight Program. But,
Yes. Yeah. Anyone who's on Instagram, I think every year you see all the pictures. You'll have an
right.
F-22 and an A-10 and then a P-51 and something else, an
Well, yeah.
F-86 or something.
Yeah,
So, okay.
we do the same thing for the Navy with the Hornets, and then Corsairs,
Okay.
or A4 or Sky Raider, Navy Sky Raider, or a couple of other things. We
Yeah.
do some for the training command. We're under Sinatra, and so we do actually do some flying for Sinatra for the
Hmm.
Legacy Flight Program. So we'll fly the T2 with the T-45 Hawk, or we'll fly a T-28 with the T-6 Texan to
Oh,
kind of
cool.
show the training command sort of airplanes as well. So.
How about this, Paul? Are you allowed to dogfight in this thing? Any of these?
Oh God, we do it all the time.
Well,
So
so how come you're not in touch with the Top Gun guys for their Grad 1v1? Have they ever invited you out? Are you familiar with that term?
yeah, I'm familiar with it, but never done it. So we've done a lot of well, let's step back. So when I talked about military style flying, when we
Mhm.
first got the L-39s, and there was a group of four of us that were flying together, and we were learning formation flying. And we had some couple of buddies that were former Air Force guys. They were F-15 Eagle guys and an F-16 guy and an A-10 guy, so four of them. And they saw us fly. I think we did an air show, and there's a civilian formation clinics that you can go to learn how to fly formation.
Mhm.
And they saw us fly, and they just about died. They said, "Are you guys serious? You really want to do this? You guys suck." And we said, "Yeah, we really do." And they said, "Okay, if you really want to do it and you're really serious about it, we'll spend the time and we'll work with you and we'll train you." So we got each one of those guys in our back seat. So we had two Eagle guys, a Viper guy, and a Hog guy. And they literally put us through for a couple of years, really, a highly disciplined formation. And we were practicing all the time to the point where we got really good. I
Wow.
mean, we were doing four-ship L-39 at air shows, aerobatic displays, tight formations, split ups, rejoin, all that sort of stuff, and got really, really good at it. And then it kind of went on from there. And then we said, well, all right, we're done practicing. Let's go do some things. So we did a whole bunch of BFM, and we were doing TAC form, and we're doing all the stuff. So we have done just about everything you can do from a training point of view, other
Hmm.
than, shooting guns and dropping bombs.
Right.
But we still do. I go out in the F-86 and the A4, and we do, high aspect BFM a lot. Um, I don't do it as much anymore because I'm getting older and it's hard on your
Oh, it
body.
is hard. Yeah, I know
But
about that.
and I don't do the demo anymore because that was really hard, and
Yeah.
I'm just getting too old for that right now.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. Well, but if you were to show up, so the grad 1v1 for all the people that might listen to this later is you go to Top Gun on a particular day and you have this great big brief, and everyone who's there gets an envelope and it tells you where to be at what time, at what altitude, and on what frequency. And when you show up, you fight whoever shows up opposed to you by 1,000 feet. And then once you're there, you can talk on the radio to make sure everything's safe. But I've shown up in an F-18 and an F-16. And I've seen everything from an F-16 and an F-18 to an F-5. I saw a T-45 once. I saw a Tornado, which was a
Yeah,
lot of fun. And so I think it'd be pretty cool to show up and see an F-86 or an
showing
A4.
F-86, yeah.
But I don't know how practical that would be. But
Yeah.
I think,
Well, I'll tell you this: doing BFM between the F-86 and the A4. The A4 was really a bomber, right? It's really an attack airplane, but they
nuclear
use it
attack.
a lot. Yeah,
Hmm.
they use it a lot for a Top Gun.
Oh yeah.
In early days,
Hmm.
with the larger engine and stuff. So it can fight pretty well. But the F-86 is way better. I mean, it doesn't have the roll rate, but boy, it's got better climb
Yeah.
performance. It's
That'd
turns
be
tight.
eye-opening for some, saucy F-18 Top Gun student to see that and think, "Oh,
Yeah,
I got this licked," and then, lo and behold, uh,
yeah,
Paul, how do you stay current in all these airplanes? Is each one its own qualification? I mean, how do
yeah,
you?
yeah. So all of these airplanes are certified by the FAA as experimental exhibition category airplanes.
Okay,
So you have to get, it's called an experimental authorization, but it's essentially an ATP check ride in the airplane.
okay,
So every airplane, particularly the jets, you have to get training. You have to do a ground school. You got to get signed off by an instructor.
hmm,
Then you have to have an exam. You have to have a certain number of hours, all that kind of stuff, and then you get signed off to fly the airplane. So I've done all of those, and each time you do one, the next one gets a little bit easier.
sure,
Um, and over the years, I've built up really a lot of time in each of the airplanes. So I'm pretty comfortable with them. But the big question is making sure that you remember all the memory items,
right,
right? So if I, like in the T2 the other day, I hadn't flown that airplane in probably 6 months.
hmm,
And so I was really stale in the airplane.
okay,
So what I did, and we have other pilots as well, and they do the same thing. I sat down with the NATOPS. I thumbed through the NATOPS. Took a half hour. I sat down with the checklist. I went through the normal procedures. I went through all the emergency procedures. Then I spent 15 minutes in the cockpit, and I touched every switch, figured out where my eyes are supposed to go, all that kind of stuff. Went through all the procedures, all the way from startup to taxi to takeoff, and then come back and land, shut down the whole bit. And then and we have a cheat sheet in the airplane, which has memory items on one side and operating limitations on the other side. So I just looked at that. I said, okay, fire in a cockpit, hot start, cold start, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. And then I turn around the other side, max EGT on start, 515 degrees, max EGT continuous, 696, whatever it is,
hmm,
just refresh your memory. And then when you go out, it takes a half an hour or 45 minutes, but if you have enough time in the airplane accumulatively, that half hour, 45 minutes, get your mind back in the game.
right,
And so we'll do that with the F-86, with the A4. I haven't flown the A4 in several months. I'll do the exact same thing.
mm,
I've got probably 400 hours of A4 time.
wow,
So it comes back pretty quickly.
yeah,
But if you don't do it, two things happen. One is you forget, if something happens, you forget the memory items,
right,
the operating limitations, and sometimes you get them confused with other airplanes.
right. which can be a real problem if an aircraft has a peculiarity, right?
Right.
So if there's something like, don't ever do this in this airplane, and if you do it in this other one, it's okay. But I think not to excuse anything less than that, because that's a very professional way to go. And that's why there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, right? But um, I, I think
Right.
some people will walk out to their car and barely look at it. You put the key in the door, hop in, and off you go. But of course, you can pull over when you have a problem. And I guess all I'm trying to say is these are obviously expensive, but they're also cherished. There's few of them, and it's your butt in the seat when it comes right down to it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a certain element of it that an airplane is an airplane. So maybe if in that moment, even if you refreshed earlier, you can't remember the exact number. Sometimes you just, I don't know if it's just a sixth sense
Oh,
or
yeah, for
just
sure.
the
The stick
ability.
and rudder skills are
Mhm.
very transferable. I
Right,
mean, whether it's the F-86, A4, L-39, T2, Mustang, Mustang's a little different because of the torque issues with the prop, but
right.
the jets are easy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's go fast, go slow.
A stall is a
You know,
stall, right?
yeah, they're all
Wing
very
buffet.
benign.
Hmm.
Yeah, you get into the things like the Mustang or the Sky Raider, and now you're talking about big round engine or a big radial engine with a big prop with a lot of P factor and a lot of torque that you have to deal with. Then things get a little complicated. Um,
Yeah,
but the jets are pretty easy, actually.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
but you're right. I mean, best thing to do, maintain aircraft control, slow down,
uh-huh.
you know,
Give
and
yourself some margin.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, and I always said the takeoff and the landing are really the two times you really have to think about what am I doing right this moment? Because if
Yes.
you're up at altitude, we used to joke if you had a fire at altitude, first thing you do, wind your clock.
Yeah, right,
Because
exactly.
like
Yeah, you got 15 minutes before you hit the ground, right?
take a deep breath and figure it out. But yeah, I always just wondered. I mean, I flew the F-18 for the bulk of my career, and then when I jumped in the F-16, at that point, I thought, how am I going to remember? And then you just kind of do. I don't know how
Yeah,
else to explain it, but I imagine for you, you have that warm up period, like you said. And then again, if you have some proficiency, even if you're bouncing back between airplanes, your
it
your
comes back.
brain can compartmentalize. Okay, hey, this is the A4, this is the T2. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, what's the Sky Raider like?
It's a monster. I mean,
Yeah.
it has 18, so 2 rows of 9 cylinders. So 18
Wow.
cylinders, 2,700 horsepower, 2,700 horsepower.
Oh, jeez.
So there's 36 spark plugs in the damn engine.
That takes the AMP a day alone, huh?
Yeah, I know, exactly. Doing compression checks on
Oh
18
gosh.
cylinders and all that sort of stuff. But it's it doesn't have a real, it's sort of heavy on the controls. The stick is sort of short coupled, so
Okay.
the stick is down in almost between your knees, almost a little bit. It's sort of weird. Um, but the best thing about it is taxiing around because you got the canopy back, and that 30 R 3650 is just kind of just rumbling, and it's like taxiing around in a Harley or something. It's just
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's super good, and it's an interesting airplane to take to air shows because there's a lot of Vietnam veterans out there,
Mm.
and a lot of guys that were on the ground in Vietnam, or a lot of pilots that were downed in Vietnam. And the Sky Raider was the search and rescue airplane for special ops search and rescue.
Sandy,
So they
right?
were escorting the helicopters, the Jolly Greens in, and they were laying down ground fire, and they were protecting those guys on the ground. I can't tell you the number of times we've been at an air show with that Sky Raider, and Vietnam veterans have come up and looked at the airplane and just touched the prop and started telling me stories about how this airplane saved their life in Vietnam.
Wow.
It's
That's
very
pretty
cool.
cool.
Very,
Yeah.
very cool.
Well, you've got a lot of aircraft in the stable there that we'd like to get on this show eventually. And we try to do an aircraft series where we go through the whole litany of what is it made to do, what does it do well, and all that. And
Yep,
the Sky Raider's a good one. Would love to get that on there because it's just, I mean, it's almost an airborne tank, isn't it? It's got
it
what,
really is.
10 hard points or more?
11 hard points. It's a 11,000-pound airplane
Wow.
and a 22,000-pound max takeoff weight. So it can literally carry its weight in fuel and armaments.
Wow.
And so we have our airplane is not the airplane, but it's painted up to be exactly the same as a picture that we found of a Skyraider and a revetment in Vietnam flying for the 6th Special Operations Squadron in Vietnam.
Mm.
And so we have a picture of the airplane. The airplane is called Bad News, so it has Bad News on the side.
Okay.
And the layout, or the armament layout underneath it, it's got cluster bombs. It's got 250-pound dumb bomb, iron bombs with daisy cutter fuses, the fuse extensions on them,
Yep.
and a couple of, and a centerline fuel tank, and a whole bunch of stuff. So we've got napalm and white Willie Pete, white phosphorus bomb, exactly the way it was sitting in a revetment in Vietnam.
That's cool. So let me ask you this, because I am reviewing some movie clips for a fighter pilot reacts type of video I'm doing tomorrow for an agency that reached out to me. And one of the scenes we're doing is the Broken Arrow scene from We Were Soldiers, which is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
And they have all these flying scenes, and it's hard to tell which is CGI and which is real. But the Skyraider in that footage looks very real. Do you guys do movies, or is there another agency like you that does Hollywood type stuff?
We have never done a movie. We've been approached a couple of times. We've done a couple of programs like on the Discovery Channel or History Channel, where people will come and do like a feature of an airplane, and it's usually not a whole program. It's usually a clip, like B-roll type stuff, like a 5-minute clip that gets integrated into a television show.
Gotcha.
That way. But we've never done any movie type things at all.
Okay. Is there someone in Hollywood like you guys? Do you know? I mean,
no, but there's a fair amount of Skyraiders. There's a lot of Warbirds out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Most of that stuff gets done out on the West Coast, and so there's probably, there's maybe 5 or 6 single seat Skyraiders and maybe another dozen fat face Skyraiders. Side by side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not tandem, it's side by side. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're usually getting them out on the West Coast.
Okay.
Like that. So the transit costs would be pretty prohibitive. But
well, you have the place in Chino. I forget the name suddenly, but
Plains of Fame. Yeah.
Thank you. Plains of Fame. Yep.
Yeah,
and then you doing the air show circuit. I wonder if you know Brad Lang. He's a captain with my airline. We flew together once, and he was talking about flying the P-51 to different air shows. Yeah,
he flies for the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, his dad was a Tuskegee Airman.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's the gentleman I'm hoping to get on the show because he just lives up in Torrance, an hour up the road, and we keep trying. And first it was the COVID, and now it's riots, and who knows what it'll be next. Right. But we keep trying.
Yeah, and, he's a good guy. I saw him on the air show circuit a few times, and he was flying the Red Tail Mustang.
Yeah, that's right. So we're hoping to have him on, and I haven't decided yet if we're going to talk about the P-51 or the Tuskegee Airmen. Maybe we'll talk about both, but yeah, that should be a lot of fun. So yeah, I imagine there is someone, like I know there is for certain cars, like if you're going to film a 60s movie, there's a lot somewhere near Hollywood that's got a bunch of old 60s cars. Yeah. And so I bet you there's someone who's got airplanes and does all that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. So you're trying to get a P-40, what is that, a Warthog? Or what do they call it? Thunderbolt.
A Warhawk. Yeah, P-47 would be the Thunderbolt.
Okay.
This would be the shark tooth, the shark tooth.
Yeah.
Flying
is that what they call the Jug?
No, that's the P-47.
Okay.
That's the P-47 Thunderbolt.
Okay.
That was European theater. That was.
I don't know my Warbirds. I need to come out apparently and say hi. All right. So besides that one, anything else on your wish list, if you will? Is it just a question of what's out there?
Yeah, not really. I think we're getting pretty limited in space right now as far as hangar space and things. And we've deliberately decided not to expand the collection into like transports or bombers like B-25 or DC-3. They just take up so much room.
Yeah.
And, you can put 3 Mustangs in the same spot that you can put a DC-3.
Yeah.
So, I think that's about it. If we get that one, if we get the P-40, we won't do it for a while because we got to get the Corsair going and everything. But then I'd be hard pressed to figure out what else
Yeah.
to really get at
Yeah.
that point.
All right, Paul, let me ask you this. Let's say
Yeah,
you've been 2 weeks away. You've been working or busy with family or whatever, and you're finally back. And let's say you're in a good mood, you know, the world is the way it should be. You're feeling healthy and happy. And you walk in to your hangar or your compound or whatever you have. And of course, you probably would have already decided this, but you look at everything and you say, I'm going flying. Where do your eyes stop?
okay.
What are you going to go jump in?
The answer is it depends. All right.
Come
And
on. That's
I
my
know,
answer for everything.
but I know exactly. But there's a reason for it. So let's say today, um, I go up there and it's 5 or 6 o'clock. It's a beautiful day. The winds are calm. It's maybe 90 degrees outside. And, it's one of those beautiful summer days. I'm getting in the Stearman
All right.
because that open cockpit, takes off and lands at 60 or 70 miles an hour, flies at 100. And I'll go up north and over the countryside and I'll fly around, or I'll go down the shoreline or in Chicago where we're from
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And you cannot beat it. Late evening, calm day, warm day, just gorgeous, absolutely fantastic. Um, if I go up there and it's say a nice standard day, 50 degrees, crystal clear blue skies, and I'm feeling young,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I'll get in the A4 and
Okay.
I'll take it out, and we got a practice area, and I'll go out there and bring it out until I make myself sick, and then I'll come back and land, and then grab a beer and be happy.
Yeah.
But
Amen.
it all depends. And then sometimes the
Yeah.
Mustang too. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been flying the Mustang a lot lately, and it's really a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a great airplane. So
Your picture on the website shows the A4 with the training wheels, as we like to call the two drop tanks. Do you fly it slick, or does it usually have the tanks on?
uh, we usually fly it with the tanks on,
Okay.
and I would prefer to fly it slick,
Oh.
particularly when I was doing the demos, because I think it's 40 knots of drag.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing maybe 20 knots of drag anyway. But
Yeah.
so one of the passes that I would do would be about a high speed pass at maybe 50 feet down the shoreline, 100
Wow.
feet, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm trying to go as fast as I possibly can. And I was doing 510, 520. And with those drop tanks off, I know I could do 550.
Wow.
And which would be about as fast as that airplane would go. But our maintenance guys won't let me take the drops off, because if we have a gear problem,
That's right.
you want to land it on the drops,
Right.
and it saves the belly of the airplane and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
what we were always told in flight school, Paul, when I went through in 1994, I think it was, that we had the TA4J Skyhawks
Yeah.
and never flew it without the two drop tanks. And that's why I called it training wheels, in case
Yep.
your wheels didn't come down. Regarding the Stearman, did you ever happen to read Stephen Kuntz's book, The Cannibal Queen?
Yes, I did. I
Isn't
love
that a great book?
Absolutely great.
So he was our guest for the A6 Intruder episode. I went and visited him in Scottsdale, Arizona at his home. And I walked out with an armful of books like a school kid leaving the
Oh,
library.
wow. Okay.
And
Yeah.
each of them was signed by him. And when he gave me the Cannibal Queen, he said, believe it or not, this is one of my most popular and asked for books. And I said, okay, why? I didn't really get into it because I was leaving,
Yeah.
but I read it and I just loved it. And it just, for anyone else, again, who's listening later, it just talks about him, like you just said, jumping in a Stearman, and he went to all 48 lower states.
Yeah.
And he had to dodge some thunderstorms and
Yeah.
a lot of other adversity along the way. But it's just such a great story because he has such a knack for writing, and you feel like you're right there with him the whole time.
No, I agree. Yeah, that was
Um,
one of my favorite books for sure.
Good. Have you had a chance to meet him?
I have not. No.
Okay. Yeah, I felt very blessed to be able to. I literally interviewed him right there in his den at his house. It was great.
Wow, cool.
So yeah,
Great.
one of the many perks of having a podcast, besides getting to meet people like you.
There you go. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So it's warbird.heritagefoundation.org, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
it's a 501c3.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Now,
Yeah.
so people can just donate if they want, or they can call you and
Yeah,
say, hey,
we don't really have anything set up to accept donations.
oh,
believe it or
really?
not.
Oh, come
So
on. I mean, there's people that want to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know, I know. But what we really like people to do is get on the website, warbirdheritagefoundation.org, look at the airplanes, sign the guest book. We're just trying to get as many people to sign the guest book as we possibly can. We have a Facebook page that you can access. We have a little over 10,000 followers on Facebook.
Oh, great.
So, we'd like to get people to sign up, follow us on Facebook. We're just doing it because, we really love Warbirds. We love the Warbird community. We like people to be interested in what we're doing. And, it's a lot of fun.
That's cool.
People are awesome.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I bet if you put a donate button up and then had a couple T-shirts, you could probably get some folks to wear your stuff at the air shows. But that's a whole new ball of wax. Then you got to deal with, like, I'm finding out right now, we're trying to sell Fighter Pilot Podcast merchandise to the EU. And I got an email the other day, hey, make sure you're setting money aside for the VAT, right? The value added tax. I said, oh, for heaven's sakes. So I think my web guy, he just basically turned off sales to the EU for right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Which isn't great, but well. So,
but then we do we'll do some tours for explorers or Civil Air Patrol or Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts.
Local there in Illinois, basically.
History clubs, local. We did the United Airline Pilots Men's Retirees Club.
Cool.
Came in. A lot of those guys are former military pilots and stuff. And so they love it. Interestingly, we did a reunion for the 509th Bomb Group, which was the bomb group that dropped the bombs in Hiroshima.
Oh, okay.
And so they still had some people. In fact, the guy who was the navigator, the pilot is dead now. I forget his name, who actually flew Enola Gay.
It's Chuck Sweeney, I think.
Maybe.
Because I thought I remember we had Chuck Sweeney, a different name on the show, and I want to say that name was used, but maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, I think Paul Tibbets. Paul Tibbets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was Paul Tibbets flew the Enola Gay. He's passed away, but his bombardier navigator was a guy by the name of, I think it was Van Buskirk or something like that.
Okay.
I think he's since passed away. But we had a big reunion there with all the airplanes around, and they had a big banquet and the whole bit. And Van Buskirk was there, and he was actually the guy who pressed the button.
Oh wow!
And so we got a chance to talk to him. It was interesting. And we've done some change of command things. We've got a Great Lakes Naval Training Station is just almost right next door. So when there's change of command, we'll have a change of command there.
Gotcha.
Things, and little things like that. So.
Paul, I was halfway right. So according to quick search here, Charles W. Sweeney was the pilot who flew Boxcar carrying He flew Fat Man atomic bomb to Nagasaki.
Okay, yeah. So it's Tibbets and Sweeney. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right,
good.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, I don't want to keep you all night. This is a lot of fun. I'm going to count you as a friend of the Fighter Pilot Podcast. I'll put you in our Rolodex as an expert, and I want to come out and see you sometime or next time.
You should. Yeah. If once the airlines get back going again, book a trip to Chicago, go to layover, and come over. We'll go fly some stuff.
Well, yeah. What do you have with two seats? Almost not everything, I suppose.
Well, the T2. You've got T2.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah. So we fly the T2. We'll fly the L39. We'll put you in the back seat of the Mustang. T6. It's got two seats. What else do we have that has two seats?
I'd probably get airsick.
Yeah, right, exactly. Wow, yeah, but that'd be fun. We do that stuff all the time.
That sounds great, Paul. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks very much for your time tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right.